Hey, how's it going? So, today we got a new episode. It's Monday. Actually, it was a halfway decent day, went by quick. And today we're going to talk about some, I don't know, some, I guess, celebrities that I've met in my life. Recently, someone was asking me about a crazy time or crazy event that occurred, and it came to mind a situation where Dusty and Dusty and I almost went heads up with Steven Seagal, and I know it sounds fucking crazy, and when you hear the story, which I'm about to get into, it's not as bad as it sounds, but so let me start with the other celebrities I've met, and then we'll get to the Steven Seagal story. So back in the day, me and Chris and Eric and Michelle were getting ready to board a plane and go to Hawaii. And in the airport, heading to our flight, in the airport was the lead singer of Anthrax, which I was an Anthrax fan in high school, so I recognized them right away. And then they did that collab with I want to say somebody, I don't know. It was decent. They had a couple albums that I used to listen to. And I recognized dude, and so went over and said hi. It wasn't that big of a deal, but later on, I was having a conversation with Chris about celebrities he's met, and he had brought that up, and I had completely forgot about that. Other celebrities I met. So some of you guys are from, and some of you guys know that I went to high school for a couple of years in San Diego, and the cast of Saved by the Bell are all from San Diego, I can guess. And so I ran into Lark Voorhees a couple of times. I ran into her in Hawaii, of all places, ironically, and then I ran into her another time. I want to say in San Diego. When I ran into her in Hawaii, I was there with my football team playing in a football tournament that they do every year called the Sean Aquina Classic. That's a whole nother story. I may tell that story next week. That's a great story. But anyways, I saw her, and there's all these schools from all over the country in Hawaii, in Honolulu, playing Hawaiian schools, and I should turn that down so you can hear me better. And so, I was like, hey, just so you know, there's like a couple hundred high school football players running around down here. You should be, careful. You're going to get bombarded. And she was with, I think, her mom and her little sister or something like that, I'm pretty sure. And then, of course, Mario Lopez, I've seen him a couple times. He wrestled in high school also. I think he was a grade ahead of me. I'm not 100%. I just know some of the guys that I wrestled with in San Diego had wrestled against him in prior years. And then there was an incident where I met Henry Cejudo, who is the former UFC champion and the former Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. And Henry Cejudo is a local kid and is really well known here. And I was refereeing at a tournament, and it's kind of funny because I see him and I'm like, ooh, I want to get a picture. So in between matches, I run over there and I'm like, hey champ, can I get a picture? And he looks up and he sees me. He says I'm a referee, and he's like, yeah, of course. So I don't know, not everybody's aware of the rules at these high school wrestling tournaments, but if you were there and you wrestled in these tournaments, and you know the rules, and the rules are, if you get caught cussing, you're kicked out. You don't get to wrestle the rest of the day, and you have to go wait for your parents outside. You can't wait inside. And so you get escorted out, and so I'm like, hey champ, can I get a picture? He's like, yeah. And so he goes over and he poses, and I snap the selfie, and then I turn the phone around and I bring the picture up, and he's like, he wants to see it. He looks at it, he looks at me, and I said, F yeah, and he just started laughing at me. And so I'll post that at the end. I have that picture. It's a pretty good picture. And then another actor who I met was somebody who I really personally am not a big fan of. So years ago, this guy was in a movie that I really liked. It was a really good movie, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. He was in a movie. And then later on, and I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but I traditionally had always been a huge Batman fan. And when they casted Ben Affleck as Batman, I decided I wasn't going to participate anymore. And I watched the movies, but I don't know, it was disappointing. I felt like, how are you going to go from Christian Bale to Ben Affleck? And then of course when they decided to cast the guy from Twilight as Batman, then I completely just stopped being a Batman fan and became a Joker fan. But anyways, so back in the day, I used to drive Uber on the weekends, and I would get out. It was kind of a weird thing. I was working full time, and I was driving Uber on the weekends, and I would make a few $100s, and it was fun. I met a lot of interesting people, had some great conversations, a couple of adventures, got hit on by women and men, and it was just a weird thing, and I kind of enjoyed it, and I had like a super high rating for a long time. Like I had a 5-star rating for like hundreds of drives, which was unheard of. And then of course one hater came along and gave me a 1 star just because he is a hater. I wish I could find that kid. No, I don't. Anyways, so back to Ben Affleck. So this guy, I don't realize it's him, and I am at, I pick him up at downtown Scottsdale, like Old Town, and he's at a restaurant, or he was at a restaurant, and he comes and he sits directly behind me, and the name was just Benjamin. That's all it said, no last name. And at that point on the app, I remember that standing out to me. I believe that at that point on the app, it was always first and last name. And that was the first time I'd ever seen somebody just get a first name and no last name, which caught me off guard. But I didn't think anything of it. And so he comes and he sits behind me, and we're chit-chatting, and we're talking about, he was telling me that he's waiting for a friend, and his friend is putting his wife in another Uber, and if I will wait for him, he'll give me a couple extra bucks on the tip. So I'm like, cool. And I, as an electrician, as a middle manager, I always made decent money. So, I wasn't really hurting for cash. The extra money was just nice. And, the kids were gone. I think Ariana was at her mom's on the weekends, and Claire and little Richie were just about out of the house. And so it wasn't like, I had anything going on. So anyways, so he's like, if you wait for my friend, I'll give you a couple extra bucks in the tip. I was like, yeah, cool, no problem. We're chit-chatting. He's telling me that he had just came from, I want to say Montana, and he lived in California, and he was on his way home to California, and he stopped to have dinner with his buddy. And so his buddy finally shows up after like 10 minutes. And at this point, I just, it's not about the money. It's just about being a nice guy and trying to, I'm there, I'm working. I might as well, make the most of it, I guess. And so his buddy shows up, and I recognize him. And I know he's an old actor, like an old Westerns actor. I never did find that guy. I need to find that guy and get his name. But I remember seeing him in a lot of old Westerns. He was an older guy. And I as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, wow, that's an old actor. But, of course, I didn't say anything. I don't ever do that. And so the three of us are now having a conversation. We're heading to the casino, actually, and he's on the phone with this girl, or he's texting with the girl at this point, and his buddy's like, if we're gonna go to the casino, I'm gonna need to get some chew. And so dude says, okay, hey, if you stop so my buddy can get some chew, I'll give you a couple extra bucks in the tip. So I'm like, cool, I can do that. So I pull into the gas station. He's now on the phone with some broad. He was telling his buddy, okay, so as we're on our way there to go, I get off the freeway to get, so this dude can get chew. Mr. Affleck is on the phone with this broad, and he's telling his buddy, you know, oh, this chick. It turns out he's going to meet an escort, and she was supposed to meet him hours ago, but they went to dinner instead, and he's got her waiting at the casino for hours, and she's gonna leave now, and he's like, no, he's trying to talk her into not leaving. And so he's rushing me, and he's rushing his buddy, and at the same time he's on the phone. He's showing his buddy pictures of this broad, and we're on our way to the casino. We stop, buddy gets out, dude gets out, he's talking to chick. He walks in front of my car, and I realize, holy crap, that's Ben Affleck. No way. So I take my phone and I turn it, and I'm trying to sneak a picture of him without him seeing that I'm trying to take a picture of him. And it was like scruffy, like it was like that picture that you see sometimes of him standing out front smoking a cigarette, all stressed. That's what he looked like, that kind of scruffy. And so anyways, so they get back in, and now I realize that who it is, and I get back on the freeway, and I start heading in that direction towards the casino. And dude's like, the chick's like, if you're not here in like 10 minutes, I'm leaving. So dude's like, you got to get me there in 10 minutes, bro. You got to get me there in 10 minutes. I'm like, cool. Well, the app starts freaking out if you go over 80 miles an hour. So I'm doing 90 miles an hour to get him there, because, I mean, there's a potential for a really good tip here. And so so I get him there on time. We get to the casino. They get out. He pulls out a wad of cash. He counts the cash. He gets to the end. He's all, dude, all I got is enough to pay the escort. And I'm like, okay, get me on the app. He's like, I'll get you on the app. So don't worry, dude, I'll take care of you. I'll get you on the app. I'm like, cool. So he leaves. I'm like, holy smokes, that's Ben Affleck. And the next, so that night I got home, and I was talking to someone about it, and they're like, you know, that wasn't Ben Affleck. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was, but, you know, whatever. So the next morning I woke up, and that person was like, I looked it up, and Ben Affleck was in Montana for rehab, trying to save his marriage with Jennifer Gardner. I'm like, well, apparently he's on his way home from rehab, and he stopped to get hammered with his buddy and go bang hookers. So the first thing I do is open the app, check it, no tip. So if any of you guys know Ben Affleck or see Ben Affleck, tell him he owes me money. Okay, so let's talk about the Steven Seagal situation. So Dusty has his own opinion. I haven't asked him about it, but we had two different vantage points of this incident. So back in the day, Dusty and I used to take our kids to play laser tag, and at laser tag, it was expensive. He had 3 kids, I had 2 kids, and we had a ton of fun playing laser tag. There was an arena not far from the house, and We would during the summertime they had decent rates, but the wintertime the prices sucked, or vice versa. And so one day, Dusty gets this idea: hey, let's go buy a laser tag setup, and then we can play all the time. And my buddy has a big property. I talked to him. He said we could play on his property. So I'm like, cool. So we got all the kids together, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go buy a laser tag setup, and then we're gonna go to dude's house and play laser tag. So Dusty and I leave to go find a laser tag setup, and we go from Toys R Us to Walmart, and we start the ones closer to us, and we start heading through the valley, stopping at Toys R Us's and Walmart's looking for laser tag setup. And we get to probably I want to say the third or fourth stop. I know we had at least been to a couple, and we were at the Toys R Us at PV Mall, and we've already been to a couple of Toys R Us's, at least one, so I have an idea of where the laser tag setup would be. So I start heading in that direction, and Dusty's like, I'm gonna ask somebody. So he goes to find somebody to ask them. So we separate. I go straight to the place where I think it's gonna be. I get there. I am eagerly scanning the aisle across, and I'm standing in the middle of the aisle, and I am completely oblivious to anybody around me. And a couple walk up, and the woman is pushing the buggy, and the man is standing next to her, and I'm not paying attention, and I'm also standing in the middle of the aisle like a big jerk, and I'm not moving, and I don't care, and I'm scanning the aisle, and I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to wait. And Dusty gets told where the item's at, or where the item should be, and he heads that way, and he turns the aisle where he's supposed to be at, and there is a couple standing in the middle of the aisle waiting for me to move so they can get past, and I am ignoring them, and I'm eagerly scanning the aisle, blocking them from getting through. So Dusty's standing behind them, and he just wants to get to me to help me look, and the dude's like 6'7". He's a monster. He's a big dude, and he's holding the buggy, and because he's so big, and his wife is super tiny, she's like really little, and so he's got his arm on the side of the buggy standing next to her, and there's a good 2-foot gap between him and the buggy because his arms are so long, I guess. And so Dusty's standing behind him, and Dusty's a tough guy, you know. I don't know. I don't want to say anything derogatory, but I feel like, you know, in this scenario, he was like, oh, well, I need to get over there, so I'm going to go over there. And Dusty crouched down and went under his arm and popped up. And when this is going on, I can kind of feel the commotion and see things going on my peripheral. So I turn and look, and Steven Seagal's lifted his arm up like he's about to drop an elbow on Dusty. He's staring at him. He's pissed. And I look up and see who it is. I'm like, no way. No way. And Dusty pops up. He looks at me. He turns to see who I'm looking at. And he's just like, oh, crap. Oh, damn, look. And he's still kind of doing this. And, you know, there's a split second there where this could be an entirely different story. I could be telling you the story about how me and Dusty whooped Steven Seagal's ass in the Toys R Us. But Dusty starts asking him questions, and specifically about an article that had came out. And I actually had read the article before this interaction, but completely forgot about it. Until we're in the heat of the conversation, I remembered, oh yeah, I read that article. And in the article, Randy Couture had called out Steven Seagal. Dusty's like, somebody called you out. Who called you out? Somebody called you out. He's was it Dana White? Did Dana White call you out? And the dude's like, he's super stoic. You know, he holds everything back, just like the movies. And then he says what he's gonna say. And he's like, no, Dana White would never call me out. Dusty's like, it was somebody. Who was it? Who was it? He doesn't say nothing. He just stands there. Now he's got his hands in his pockets. His wife eventually leaves, and we end up sitting there chit-chatting for like a long time, at least 20 minutes, and then we got pictures with them afterwards. But dude's like, Dusty's finally like, was it Randy Couture? Did Randy Couture call you out? I'm like, and actually my thought at the time was like, no, but it was Randy Couture that called him out. And his response was, did you see my response? Dusty was like, yes, I did. Your response was, any place, anytime, anywhere? And he's like, no. So my response was, any place, anytime, anywhere, no cameras, no audience, because I would kill him. And then, I don't know, that was kind of the main point of the whole conversation. I knew that he was doing some stuff with Arpaio at the time, and we asked him about that, and he's like, yeah, we're shooting the show. I own a house here in Scottsdale, and we got some kids or something we're buying presents for, we're buying toys for, and or his wife was. And then I think, if I remember correctly, I think that Dusty and him had mutual friends or knew mutual people. But yeah, it was kind of cool. And then we ended up taking pictures, which I'll put those at the end of this as well, before I post it. And it was pretty crazy, actually. It's just a funny story. But I'm kind of curious. I'm gonna have to call Dusty this evening and ask him what he remembers from that incident. But I feel like there was a split second when this would be an entirely different story. But anyways, I hope everybody has had a good weekend and their Monday has gone by easily and comfortably, like mine did. Stay prayed up, and till next week.